This last part of Chapter 3 deals with tissues. We've talked about cells, which are the first level of organization after chemistry, and now we're going to talk about tissues, the next level of organization. Our objectives for this section include: list the 4 types of tissue and tell their general function, describe how epithelial tissues are classified, list and describe 2 types of glands, describe the general characteristics of connective tissue, describe the process of wound healing, and describe the development and treatment of cancerous cells. Body tissues are groups of cells that are similar in nature and that came from the same basic stem cell. They group together to perform a special function. There are 4 tissue types. Epithelial tissues are found covering and lining areas of the body. Connective tissue is involved in supporting structures. Muscle tissue is involved in movement, and nervous tissue is involved in control. Epithelial tissues are unique in that the cells are closely packed together. They're held together by tight junctions and/or desmosomes. Because they line areas and cover surfaces, they have what's called a free surface. That is, a part of the tissue is exposed in some way to an outside part of the body. We call this free surface the apical surface. The cells then rest on what's called a basement membrane. This is a little bit of non-living material that helps provide a framework for the cells to rest on and helps cement them to underlying cells. Epithelial tissues do not have a blood supply directly to them. That's what avascular means, no blood supply. But they are capable of undergoing mitosis throughout your entire life, and because of that, they're capable of replacing themselves when they are damaged. We call that regeneration. Epithelial tissue has a number of functions. Because it is found on surfaces, it can protect the underlying structures. Sometimes it is modified to absorb materials. It can also act as a filter or as an excretory unit, getting rid of unwanted waste products. Sometimes the cells are involved in manufacturing something that they secrete, like mucus. And because they are on surfaces, they may play a role in sensory reception. Epithelial tissue are found covering surfaces of the body and lining hollow spaces in the body. They also form all of the glands in the body. And this is one of the easiest ones to classify because they're classified either based on the shape of the cell and how many layers of the cells there are. So if there is a single layer of cells, this is called a simple tissue. If there are several layers of cells, this is called stratified. Now, this is the free surface or the apical surface. There is no other body structure attached to this side. And here's the basal surface lying on that basement membrane, which is really just a little bit of non-living material that sort of acts to filter material that comes from underlying structures to the cells, as well as providing kind of a framework for them. So one way we classify is by number of cell layers, simple or stratified. The other way is by the shape of the cell. If the cells are irregular in shape and usually somewhat flattened, they're called squamous or squamous. If they are box-like, they're cuboidal, and if they're more rectangular, they're columnar. So you can have simple squamous epithelium, simple cuboidal epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, or stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal, stratified columnar. Epithelial tissue also makes up all the glands in your body. Now, a gland is simply one or more cells that make and secrete a product. Glands can be single cells, but usually they're more than one cell. And there are 2 types of glands. Endocrine glands are ductless. That is, there's no tube that takes the material from the secreting structure to any kind of surface, but rather their secretions are released into the bloodstream, and the bloodstream takes the secretion wherever it needs to go. Exocrine glands secrete into ducts or tubes, and so their secretions are carried short distances to the surface someplace. So endocrine glands are things like your pituitary gland or your thyroid gland, which secrete hormones into your bloodstream. An exocrine gland would be like your sweat glands. They're just under the surface of the skin, and they secrete sweat, and ducts take that to the surface of your skin. Connective tissue all originate from a single cell type called the mesenchyme cell. They look a lot different. As we talk about all the connective tissues, you're going to think, well, how can you say those are all the same? But they originate all from the same stem cell, this mesenchyme cell, and that's what makes them tissues. They have varying degrees of vascularity. Some of the connective tissues are extremely vascular. They have a good blood supply, and some of them have virtually no blood supply. In epithelial tissue, we saw the cells tightly packed together, but in connective tissue, the cells don't touch each other, but are rather separated by a non-living material known as matrix. Matrix is an amorphous material, meaning it doesn't particularly have a shape, it's just kind of there, and it's found between the cells, and it's composed of interstitial fluid, mostly water, and dissolved in the water are some different proteins. Some of these are your cell adhesion proteins like fibronectin and laminin, and these help hold the cells together. Others are proteoglycans, which are part protein, part carbohydrate, like hyaluronic acid and chondroitin, and these give the various connective tissues some of their characteristics in terms of rigidity or flexibility, things like that. The matrix helps hold the cells and keeps them supported, but also acts as a molecular sieve. That is, these proteins are close enough together that there are tiny spaces between them, and material can diffuse through those spaces to get to the cells. Connective tissue helps bind and support structures together in your body, may also serve to protect structures, and may be involved in transporting materials in your body. Connective tissue is the most abundant tissue in the body. Every single organ has some connective tissue associated with it because every single organ has to be supported or held in place or held to something else. There are several types of connective tissue. Bone is a connective tissue. Now, this is a very hard connective tissue providing support and protection in the body. Cartilage is also a type of connective tissue, and this one is a little more flexible, and it's found in various places in the body associated with the skeletal system. Dense connective tissue has lots of heavy fibers in it, making it very strong and very flexible. It's very tough. All of the fibers run in the same direction, parallel to each other, so tendons and ligaments are types of dense connective tissue. Then we have loose connective tissue, which is a softer kind of tissue. It has fewer fibers in it, and it's just not quite as well organized. Areolar tissue is a very light spiderwebby kind of tissue that loosely attaches materials together. Adipose tissue stores your fat, and reticular tissue acts as sort of an internal network for some of your softer organs like the liver and the spleen. And then blood is another of your connective tissues. This is the one that's involved in transportation, but there are also cells in the blood that protect you from infection. Muscle tissue is highly cellular. There are very little space in between the cells. It has a great nervous supply and a great blood supply, so it's well innervated and highly vascularized. The muscle cells involved in muscle tissue are packed full of myofilaments. These are those intermediate type filaments found in the cytoskeleton, and because of their ability to slide across each other, they provide for movement. There are three types of muscle tissue: skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. Skeletal muscle is sometimes called striated muscle because when you look at it under the microscope, it's got all these little tiny stripes in it. It's also voluntary muscle because you consciously tell this muscle when to contract. This is the muscle that's attached to your bones and responsible for your ability to move around, to walk, stand up, bend your elbow, things like that. Smooth muscle is non-striated and involuntary. Here you see the more spindle-shaped muscle cells of smooth muscle. There are no little striations in it. And this particular type of muscle tissue you have no conscious control on. Smooth muscle is found in the walls of hollow organs like blood vessels or your stomach. And when these cells contract, they move stuff through the tubes and hollow organs of your body. And cardiac muscle is striated, but it's involuntary. The striations are a little more faint here. These heavier lines you're seeing are special cell junctions that hold the cardiac muscle tissue together. But this muscle tissue is involuntary. You can't control this one. This one is found in the heart, and of course when the heart beats, you have movement of blood. Nervous tissue conducts electrical impulses. So it's going to regulate the body's activity and control the body. The brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves are composed primarily of nervous tissue. Whenever you have damage to your body, you have some sort of healing that must go on. Ideally, this occurs as the result of regeneration. Sometimes it occurs as the result of fibrosis. Now, with regeneration, you replace with exactly the same tissue type. Epithelial tissue, the liver, and connective tissue are all regenerative. That is, when you cut through your skin, what you get back is more skin. When you break a bone, when that heals, the healed spot is still bone. When you have regeneration as a part of wound healing, you get fully functional tissue back. Now, sometimes the cells involved can't make more of themselves, so you simply replace with connective tissue. This is when you have fibrosis. Connective tissue have lots of fibers in them, hence the name fibrosis. Fibrosis, healing by fibrosis, gives you scar tissue. And scar tissue, while it's very strong and flexible and holds things together, will not function the same way as the original tissue. Whenever a tissue is damaged, the first thing that happens is the capillaries in the area become more permeable. That is, the spaces between the cells of the capillaries open up a little bit, and so nutrient-rich fluids from the blood can leak into the surrounding tissue. This is going to make for a little bit of swelling in the area. Also, a clot begins to form. Now, the clot helps protect the area by sort of isolating it, and if it's a place where there are rough edges, it will begin to bind the edges together. The next thing that happened is granulation tissue forms. The clot is a temporary holding spot. It's full of fibrinogen, which is a fiber, but it's a temporary fiber. So if we're going to keep the edges held together, we need to replace the fibrin with collagen. Collagen is a more permanent fiber, and as well as being very strong and tough. Once we have the edges held together, if there are any gaps, we need to fill it in. And this is when either regeneration or fibrosis occurs. Once this happens, you have the permanent repair. Some of the complications of wound healing involve the fact that you are going to form scar tissue from time to time, and scar tissue is non-functional. If the scar tissue is formed internally, you may have adhesions develop. This is when the scar tissue goes and binds to nearby structures so that two structures are held together that normally are not held together. what happens is now these structures cannot move like they're supposed to as they function, and sometimes that causes some pain or some inability for it to function completely. People who have adhesions sometimes have surgery to cut the adhesions. The only problem is there's more healing that has to go on, and typically you simply make more adhesions. Which tissues regenerate are going to vary. Typically, a tissue that has a good blood supply is going to regenerate better than one that does not have a good blood supply. And remember, regeneration is making the same type of tissue, so you don't have scar tissue. And some cells lose their ability to undergo cell division, and so those can never divide. Now, epithelial tissue, your fibrous connective tissue, and bone regenerate very well. Whenever you damage those, you get more of that back and they're fully functional. Skeletal muscle is a very poor regenerator. For the most part, skeletal muscle loses its ability to divide as you get older, so there's very, very limited regeneration, if any. This means that you get scar tissue in there, which is non-functional. Cardiac tissue and nervous tissue in the brain and spinal cord totally lose their ability to divide as you get older, so all you're going to ever get there is scar tissue, which is non-functional. You start out as a single cell, and for a long time, for several days, those cells divide and divide and divide, and you're just a mass of exactly identical cells. But cells will begin to specialize very soon into the development process. We call this specialization differentiation. Now, when cells differentiate, they lose some of their characteristics, sometimes losing their ability to divide. We call them amitotic cells. This is one of the things that happens to nervous tissue and most of your muscle tissue. If you think about it, the cells in your skin and the cells in your skeletal muscle have the very same DNA because you all came from that one basic fertilized egg. And yet your skin cells display a whole bunch of different characteristics from your skeletal muscle cells. This is because when cells differentiate, they begin paying attention only to certain parts of their DNA. They just sort of stop paying attention to some of it. That's what differentiation is all about, specializing. As you get older, you start to lose some of your cellular characteristics, and nobody knows exactly what causes aging. It may be genetics. We may just all be born with a certain kind of time clock in us, and we're going to age in a certain way. It may be the result of things we do to our cells, the chemicals we put in our bodies, the things we expose ourselves to. It could simply be because as we get older, our heart doesn't pump as effectively, and so there's reduced blood flow to tissues, and that may give us some of our aging problems. It's probably a combination of several factors, but no matter what, we do all age and we lose some of our cellular capabilities. Now, some of the things that happen when you age is your epithelial tissues thin. They get very delicate. If you've ever been around an older person and maybe saw a Band-Aid removed, you may notice that that sticky stuff on the Band-Aid takes a few layers of skin with it. You've got to be very careful when you're handling old people, even handling their skin, because the skin breaks so easily. Glands reduce their secretions. Now, the tear ducts don't secrete as many tears, salivary glands don't secrete as much saliva, all kinds of digestive organs secrete fewer secretions. And of course, this leads to things like dry mouth and dry eyes and sets you up for other problems. Bones become porous and weaken, meaning that it's easier for them to break. And the elastic fibers and the collagen fibers in your connective tissue replace slower. You are constantly losing these fibers and replacing them. As you get older, you don't break them down any faster, but you don't replace them as fast as you used to, so you end up with less elastic and collagen tissue in your body. This is one of the things that leads to droopy skin and wrinkles and things like that. As you get older, you have fewer muscle cells. Now, there's a lot of evidence that exercise will decrease the rate at which you lose muscle cells and increase your ability to keep strong bones. However, even exercise does not totally reverse this process. Nutrition probably plays a role in several of these things. It's difficult to say just how much of a role nutrition plays. As you get older, changes occur in cell division. Sometimes cells divide inappropriately, in which case you get neoplasms. This literally means new growths. Hyperplasia is a condition where you have increased cell division because of some local irritation or some other condition. For example, if you have a shoe that rubs your heel, you may get a callus there. During pregnancy, there are some hormones secreted that cause the breast to enlarge. That's the result of hyperplasia. On the other side of that, you have atrophy. If you don't stimulate something, it will decrease in size and eventually lose its function. If you've ever had a broken arm, you may have noticed that when the cast came off, that arm that had been in the cast was slightly smaller and weaker. You had to rebuild that muscle because you hadn't been using those muscles. Cancer is an abnormal cell mass. It's a neoplasm or a tumor. Now, cancers can be benign or malignant. Benign tumors are usually encapsulated, easily removed. It's just odd little growth. Malignant tumors, however, are not encapsulated. The cells can spread through the body. Cancer cells lose their ability to stick to each other. Most of your tissues, or all of your tissues, if they're healthy, all of the cells recognize each other and they hang out together. They stick together. Cancer cells lose that camaraderie. They don't stick to each other. They easily break free, and they can get in the lymphatic vessels or the bloodstream and be carried to other parts of your body where they may set up housekeeping. Cancer cells starts with some cell transforming. Something happens to this cell and it de-differentiates. Instead of being a highly specialized cell, it starts to go backwards. It becomes less specialized. Now, part of the specialization of cells is controlling the mitosis of that cell. Some cells totally lose the ability to divide, but most of them start paying attention to signals about surrounding tissue. If there's a certain amount of crowding to them, they don't divide. They only divide if you really need them to. Usually, this transformation is the result of a change in the DNA of the cell. Some sort of chemical or physical damage occurs that causes the DNA to change, turning off certain controlling genes or turning on genes that were turned off to prevent rampant cell division. Cancer is treated typically by radiation, chemotherapy, and surgical removal or excision. The treatments are frequently very damaging to the healthy tissue around the tumor. There are some newer treatments. One method is to reduce the blood supply to the tumor. Because a tumor is very rapidly growing, it tends to suck a lot of blood toward it with lots of nutrition. If you can sort of cut off its blood supply, you may starve it to death. Another research thing they're doing is to try to find a protein on the tumor cell that is not found on the regular cells. They can then develop an antibody that will go in and attack the tumor and will leave the normal cells alone. So far, these two treatments are in just being tried out. So, in summary, tissues are groups of similar cells that perform a special function. There are 4 major tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. Epithelial tissue covers and lines things. Connective tissue supports, protects, holds things together. Muscle tissue provides for movement, and nervous tissue provides for control of the body. Tissue repair will involve either regeneration of the tissue or fibrosis, With regeneration, you get fully functional tissue back. With fibrosis, you get scar tissue. As cells develop, they specialize. If they despecialize or transform, this is when you can get a cancer cell. All of the following are connective tissue except bone, gland, cartilage, or blood. The correct answer is gland. All glandular tissue is epithelial. The tissue involved in moving food through the digestive system would be epithelial, connective, muscle, or nervous. Remember, muscle tissue is involved in movement, so the correct answer here is muscle tissue.